Hello, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Incentivize Innovation in Offshore Outsourcing. My name is David Goodstein, and I am a webinar coordinator for the Outsourcing Institute. It is our pleasure to be the host of today's event. I'll be working in the background to answer any technical or general questions that you may have. We encourage you at any time during the presentation to submit your question to today's speaker. To do so, click on the question box, type your question in the space provided, and click the Submit button. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll be receiving a follow-up email in approximately 2 days, which will have a link with today's recorded webinar and presentation slides. The webinar recording and presentation slides will also be available at outsourcing.com. Before we introduce today's speaker, I'd like to say a few brief words about the Outsourcing Institute for those who aren't familiar with us. The Outsourcing Institute is a professional association dedicated to providing independent best practices, tools, roadshow events, and networking opportunities for all forms of outsourcing. Located at outsourcing.com, we have 70,000 members globally. OI specializes in providing low-cost and no-cost alternatives to outsourcing buyers in need of RFP tools, vendor selection assistance, training, as well as general support and coaching. For those of you in this market, we offer an array of very targeted sponsorship and promotional opportunities. Our sister company, CMS, provides recruiting services for those seeking to hire outsourced professionals experienced at buying, selling, managing, or consulting in this arena. Our contact information is at the bottom of the screen for those who have any questions. At this time, I would now like to introduce today's speaker, Satyanarayan. He is the founder and president of Offshoring Success. Offshoring Success helps turn around underperforming outsourcing relationships and helps you avoid pitfalls if you are getting started. Seth is a pioneer in offshore outsourcing with nearly 2 decades of experience. As an executive, he has provided leadership to launch and manage outsourcing. For the past dozen years, he has helped companies across the industries successfully deploy outsourcing. He's also the author of a book on best practices on offshore outsourcing. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to hand it off to Seth.
Thank you, David. Good morning to you all. I am so glad that you all are joining us for this webinar today. And I would like to understand our audience before I get started. So I have a polling question to get started here. Let's go to the polling question, David. It is, are you currently outsourcing? This is simply yes, no. I just want to get some visibility on those who are outsourcing versus those who are simply considering outsourcing in the audience. So let's take a moment. So I'll let you guys vote. So David, can we summarize what the Okay, all of you are currently outsourcing. Terrific. That leads me to the next question, which is very relevant to today's topic. That has to do with your experience with innovation. You know, as you know, our topic today is incentivizing innovation in the offshore outsourcing. And you can check on one of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just trying to get a feel for the level of success you guys have had in incentivizing innovation. And number one, the one really means that you have to spell everything out, and then the offshore outsourcing service providers simply execute and deliver what you ask them to do. And at the other extreme, they take initiative, they make suggestions, and they make process improvements. And essentially, they really own certain piece. They are trying to make sure that they give you not only just do what you ask them to do, they go beyond that. So let's take a moment. Okay, right smack in the middle. All of you, about at 3. So it is neither that they are at 5 or nor they are at number 1, which is exactly as prescribed. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now here's what I find working with a number of companies, helping them either streamline or get more value from their outsourcing. Majority of them basically say, you know, I need to spell everything out to my partner or to my vendor, is the word that's quite often used. And my recent conversation is a frustrated exec who said, God, you know, outsourcing, I mean, the cost is okay, but it's taken an awful lot of time, and I got to lay out everything. Now, in this poll, majority of you feel like it is, in fact, all of you feel it's somewhere in between. And let's see what we can do to move up the value chain in using outsourcing. Let's see if we can move that to, instead of being a 3, maybe a 4 or 5, which is really the takeaway for you guys from this webinar. Hope you get some ideas out of that. And one technique that has been tried is outcome-based approach. Okay. I'm going to jump right into the next slide here. Rather than give you the theoretical aspect of all of that, I'm going to talk about an example where outcome-based was used and used successfully in this particular case. This company is a pretty large company, over $500 million in sales, and they have a security product which is both B2B and B2C. And they have been outsourcing their tech support, voice, email, and chat. They have a broad suite of products, and they took some portion of it, they outsourced the tech support. And you see that the size was about 350 or so support agents, and they were doing all of these, voice, email, and chat. Now, in this story kind of spans about 2 or 3 years of experience of this particular company. And year 1, if you go to the next slide, I will give you a picture of what how they organized it. This is very traditional, very typical. The customer input, in this case, the client who is doing the outsourcing from the US. This turns out to be, although I work with a lot of companies who are locations around the world, this company, the outsourcing service provider, is based in India. So these are some of the things that were happening, meaning that they focused upon call duration, call volumes, and the metrics for CSAT. You know, I mean, that's really a good metric to have, customer satisfaction, and whatever minimum response time. So all of this really is focusing upon call handling, and a very efficient call handling, if I might add. However, when beyond meeting these metrics, the vendor had really no incentive to go above and beyond that. Now, why is that even a consideration? When this particular company wanted to increase their support volume because they had more products and they were expanding, and the call volume on this set of products began to increase. All of that meant there was need for additional tech support, and it was a linear function. The more support meant more bodies, and which really meant for the vendor more revenue for them, and more cost for the company from here that was doing the outsourcing. Now, what's wrong with this picture? Now, what's wrong with this picture is, as you go through, you get more experience, you really should be becoming even more efficient, should be able to handle more things with the same numbers of people. That's the productivity improvement concept that we all take for granted. But if you are working with an outsourcing service provider, that's not always there. I'm not saying the exceptions don't exist. But in this particular case, when they started negotiating for more work, the vendor said, you want more work, happy to help you. Let's see how many more bodies do you want to get from me. So it's a simple, straight labor arbitrage. However, our outsourcing company was not very happy with that scenario. So they said, hey, let's sit down and work out a different approach wherein we will give you more incentive to work smarter, better. In this, before we go to the next slide, one of the things that I sit down and work out with my clients is, hey, are you both on the same page? That question itself draws skeptical audience. What do you mean? They are our vendors and they are providing other people and they're doing a good job. But my question is, are you guys really motivated to do the same thing? I submit to you that majority of the time your vendor and you might be at odds with each other. Here's why I say that. The vendor is motivated by wanting to have more people, which is what their more of their revenues. Now, if they really need to meet all the minimum metrics, etc., that's been set out in order to just stay in business and make you happy, that they will do. But if they improve productivity, guess what? The number of people that it takes for them to do the job for you goes down. How are you paying them? You are paying them by numbers of people. In essence, you are asking them to reduce revenues, their revenues. Why would they want to do that? It does not make sense for them. Okay, so what happens quite often is you want to reduce costs, you want to improve productivity, and so on as the time goes on. However, the vendor is motivated to do just the opposite. They want to increase staff. Let's take a look at the next slide. I'll share with you what happened in this particular case on year 2. They used the outcome-based approach, and the focus was on case resolution, new set of metrics. The whole idea of this slide here really is, okay, so the operational metrics that we talked about, they stayed, but here is the difference, that they sat and negotiated a different set of metrics. That is, not only you need to meet CSATs, but how much improvement in CSAT are you going to do year over year? Not just that, but if you, in order to do that, the vendor had to go do a whole bunch of steps that they needed to take. They needed to do more automation, more in the FAQ improvement. They started using knowledge bases much more, and do a lot of productivity improvements at the end of the day. And this, a lot of people give lip service, but since the metric was set up so that how much was the improvement, not just on meeting CSAT, the whole game changed here. So at the end of that experiment that they ran in the second year, all of these metrics improved, and cost as a percent of sales actually came down, the support cost. Now, which is what you guys would be striving for. Now, not only that, the metrics were set up in a fashion that the vendor revenues actually improved. It did not go down. Now, that's a very important point. You really need to set up the metrics so it's a win-win for everyone. Okay, let's go on to the next slide here. Okay, metrics. What metrics that you set up really shapes the behavior of all of us. Take a look at sales as an example. You can have success-based plans versus salary-based plans, and you walk into a department store and how they behave, and you can pretty readily tell it is success-based or salary-based. There are pros and cons of each. I'm not advocating one over the other. I'm simply pointing out that what metrics that you set up makes a difference on how people behave. Okay, there are these other examples, right? You can set up project-based performance bonuses, and in the US, in startups, why do people go to work for startups? There are stock options, and they don't mind spending ungodly hours for some number of years with the hope that at the end of the day there's a carrot waiting for them, hopefully. Weight Watchers is one of my favorites. Just the mere fact that you are going to measure your weight once a week really changes your behavior. Just knowing that. Now, the fact that you are measuring specific metrics, that makes all the difference in the world as to how people end up behaving. The same thing is true of whether it is a tech support, product development, business process outsourcing, all of those. You need to figure out what metrics make sense to you, but in each case those things apply. Let's go to some, I have a next slide here. This kind of summarizes, it's a quote that I found on the internet. I'm going to let you read it. I don't have a huge amount of value add to this. Let's take a moment here. I'll be quiet and let you read this. Okay, the key takeaway here is going towards outcome-based metrics where possible. That's the key also. It gets to the heart of the matter, a sense of what you're really attempting to achieve. Okay, I'm going to give you some examples from the tech support world in the next slide. Okay, here are two columns here. One is the traditional process-based metrics, and usually you have person months, how much are the handling times, response times, the number of calls, error rates, and schedules. These are all traditional process-based metrics. You really need them, not that you don't need them, but if you stop there, it incents a behavior to just meet those particular metrics. However, if you are successful in establishing outcome-based metrics like these, you may have some other needs in your own particular situation. What is the first call resolution or customer satisfaction rating? I would even go so far as to change that to say what is the improvement in customer satisfaction year over year, as we talked about in the previous, one of the previous slides. The abandonment rate, how many people are going out from the calls. And the last one is really interesting. Some of my clients have implemented customer lifetime value. You're not only providing tech support, and you have set up the mechanisms to lead that to renewal of support contracts. Again, I'm not advocating turning every tech support agent into a salesperson, but I'm simply saying that you need to put in the mechanisms to be able to look at outcome-based, and however you implement it. It's an implementation level detail where you need to go to who does what kind of stuff. Okay, so these are some examples in the tech support world. All right, let's go to the next slide, David. I made many of these points. However, let's look at it together. The process-based traditional approach is focused upon the input. It is either tasks, person hours, man hours, rather than business results. And a lot of people do that because it's easy to measure, and sometimes, not always, sometimes it's hard to measure the output. And I talked about the business goals not being aligned earlier, so I've just listed that as a bullet point in here. Now, in going towards outcome-based, you are really tying the performance of both entities, the outsourcer and the outsourcing service provider. My favorite in this area is to really talk about, let's say you are the vice president of, for this example, tech support. You are measured by your boss by how much improved, not only how much your CSATs are, but year over year, how you're improving the productivity of your own group. Think of it this way. The outsourcing service provider, think of them as your own group, and you should set up the same metrics for them as you would for your own self, so to speak. Okay, some of my clients have gone so far as to set up a skeleton group here of managers and some key people, and a large portion of the actual doing has been transferred offshore, but with the right metrics. But they have been set up, they can execute to exactly the same metrics that what the local group is held responsible for. So everybody is on the same page. Okay. What do you get from outcome-based? That's the topic of the next slide. Okay. So you are able to incentivize innovative behavior from your provider. I don't want to leave you thinking that outcome-based is all that it takes to incentivize innovation. I have a slide that comes up later on that talks about a few other ideas and approaches needed, but outcome-based is a big part of it. Now, you can realize higher savings because you are continuing to improve productivities. Now, you may also get more freedom from lower level details of the operation per se, but that again depends upon the kind of outsourcing that you are doing and the level of the relationship that you have. One thing that I want to add here, I have not tried setting up an outcome-based metric with someone brand new. In fact, I wouldn't recommend it on day one. You need to get familiar. Perhaps a good way to start is the traditional T&M kind of thing. Again, depends upon your situation. But once the trust is built, once the relationship is in place, all the other basics are in there, you may want to think of trying outcome-based. Okay, let's go to, I want to see what your experience has been in using outcome-based approach. There is a polling question on the next slide. Take a look at this. This is sort of self-explanatory, and let's take a moment to have you guys provide your input. David, you can summarize it anytime you think that you got the polling done. Wow, that's very good. 50% of you have tried, it's successful, terrific. And nobody has seen failures, and the other half somewhere in between. Okay, that's good. That's good. Actually, I'm finding that this audience, you are doing better than what I find in most companies that I interact with, and that's great. That's really great. Okay, let's go. There are, since you guys have tried already you may be aware of these, but let me summarize some of the challenges. You go talk to somebody. The first is resistance by providers. You go tell them, look, we're going to measure you an outcome compared to number of person months, person hours, and you're taking them out of their comfort level. Again, this is not everyone, but a large majority of the companies tend to operate that way. So there is typically, if they are not used to it, an initial resistance by providers. I was having a discussion with the CEO of one of the service provider organizations 2 or 3 months ago, and I've known this individual for, gosh, somewhere 15 to 20 years. And their entire company is really predicated upon the, the T&M, traditional labor arbitrage model. And he was asking me, I was asking him rather, that have you tried this approach, outcome-based? Well, he was instantly more or less taken aback and saying, gosh, tell me all about it. And then when I told him all about it, he said, I really don't know. I don't know how much control I have over the outcome. I really don't know if I want to try it. So there is those kinds of initial resistance. And then I asked him the key question, well, look, if one of my clients wanted to try this, would you be willing to sit down and have a discussion? And he said, of course, I will have a discussion. But there is that level of resistance. I've seen that they may not express that openly to your client, if you are the client. But since I've known this individual for a long time, he was willing to share that information with me. So if you guys are going to try that, be prepared for that is my message to you. There may be initial resistance. When we talk about outcomes, it's really not as straightforward as simple. The outcome for a CFO is different. The outcome for the VP is different. And if you are the project manager who is running a particular project or some operation, you are looking at different metrics. So developing the metrics for the right level of organization and identifying whose outcome we are talking about, that can be a challenge. It's not that it cannot be done, but it is being done, as half of you have already pointed out, but that can be a challenge. In developing the new metrics, again, there is the business, operational, all of these. You need to have the right balance, and frankly, once you put it together, you need to work with your service provider to make sure the contract reflects the new reality. And a lot of vendors bring up this issue. Hey, if I'm being measured by the outcome, don't come tell me I need to give you 5-year experienced person or a 10-year experienced person. I'm going to put whoever I want as long as I give you the right results at the end of the day. So that is a reasonable argument, and I think it's something that you have to watch that. So you cannot completely let go and delegate everything to them, but at the same time you may want to give them more freedom than what you might be doing today. So it's a trade-off between vendor independence versus complete visibility over the vendor's operation. That leads me to the next point in here, organizational roles and responsibilities. As I pointed out earlier in the presentation, I have one organization that I know of wherein there is a VP tech support, and a few of his direct reports are here, and then after that a huge majority of the operating responsibilities have been assigned to the service provider. But the nice thing about it, they all operate really as one entity, although they are legally separate entities. That leads me to how do you address these challenges? Okay, that's on the next slide. Okay, the first thing, I started talking about moving the relationship vendor to a partner, which is really the key thought of here is, look, don't look at them as us versus they, and this thought process has to permeate not just the top level managers, but throughout the organization. You simply need to look at them as your partner, extension of your operation, and be willing to share with them your proprietary information, and here you're talking about the internal knowledge, improve the knowledge bases, processes, tools, and all of that. And it can also be that they can provide, if they are really on the same team as you, on the same page as you, information and ideas and suggestions should flow both ways, not just that you are coming up with all the stuff and handing it to them, and they can and should start making suggestions on how do you improve processes, how do you do all of that. All of you are working towards the common metrics, if you will, and that takes time, what the right metrics are, and you need to come up with those. So that means you got to determine the right metrics. And I talked about these other things, review and revise management processes. That's part of making the switch over once, and you got to have a good contract that calls out those particular metrics. And I've seen many contracts wherein it really favors one party or the other, but you got to make sure it's a kind of win-win deal. And beyond that, you need to, if you have delegated a lot of responsibility to your vendor, you need to make sure you got the right processes to make sure things are going to continue to go well. That means that you need to regularly audit and review, dive into details when necessary, go into root causes when things do not work out, and those things will happen as a part of the process. Now, if you are part of a large company, it is easy to say, look, it's not in my job, it is somebody else who did whatever, you didn't get the support. So the vendors should not have to worry about, okay, which part of the organization does what. You need to have the right level of organization here that they're interfacing with. So don't pass the buck. Make sure you provide the right level of support to the vendors. Now, I want to tell you a quick story here. When I was working for one of the companies, this has to do with the moving the relationship or vendor to a partner and building trust. And trust building doesn't happen overnight, whether in any kind of relationship, especially when you are working with a vendor that may be or a partner that may be 10,000 miles away. There are cultural differences and time zone differences. How do you work with them? How do you make sure they understand you, you understand them? And I'll give you, after about a couple of years of me personally working with this one particular service provider, we initially set up the T&M model, then we started moving up the chain. And, we were having a conversation with one of their senior execs, and the question of trust and what we would do each other came up. And one of the guys said to me, Seth, if you call me up in the middle of the night and said, take 100 developers, put them on the plane, and fly them to Mexico, I would do it. I would first think that you're gone out of your mind. Second, I don't know what the heck Seth is up to, but I think I should do it. So I would go organize all that, put him on the plane. Right after I put him on the plane, then I would call you up and say, what's really going on in here? Help me understand. So guys, I've worked with a lot of companies over many years. That is really trust, being willing to do that. And the trust goes both ways. I'll give you the flip side of that trust. I was coming from Chennai. No, I was coming from Mumbai back to U.S. after having gone for a 2-week review to India. And as I was getting ready to board the plane, my cell phone rings, and my partner, senior exec, was on the line, and he says, Seth, You can't get back to the U.S. We really need you here. And you need to get off the plane, get your baggage back, whatever the heck you got to do. You need to come back. We need your support. I really didn't know what it was that was going on that was so important. He had to stop me. But I got off the plane, and really it turned out that I needed to go to the American consulate with them being the client to help them with some visa issues. I was the only one who could do it, who could help them with the timing issue. And had he not done that, I would have gotten back to the U.S., and then we would not have gotten back the right people at the right time. It would have, in fact, impacted my job performance and our projects here. So I'm really glad that he was willing to do that and take the initiative. So my key point really here is that trust goes both ways. Okay, beyond the outcome-based and how you address these challenges, there are other key factors that contribute to both motivation and innovation with the offshore teams. Okay, we ran a survey, and I've seen some other surveys. Type of work that you outsource to your service provider has a lot to do with how motivated they continue to be, and that has impacts on turnover, motivation, innovation, all of those things. If all you really are doing is over time, not initially, once you have established a relationship, things are working. If you're really doing either low-level work or level of work that nobody wants to do here, and these are bright guys, bright engineers, whether you're outsourcing to India or one of the East European countries, so they also want to do interesting work. So that's got a major impact. How do you do that? Does it apply to you? And it's situation dependent. You need to take a look at your own environment and decide what kind of work, what kind of progression that you can promise them over time. Okay. The other one is the level of autonomy, right? So you give them these metrics and goals, but let's just say, and you tell them to innovate and to improve productivity, etc. The very first time they make a mistake, if you slap them on their hand, they're not very likely to continue that innovation for you. And that really speaks to the last bullet I have there. You need to have the innovation culture, willingness to take risks and fail. Risk means they may fail at some things, but you really need to work together to make sure you minimize the failures, and they are still willing to take some risks and make sure that things actually work out over the long haul. By the way, my take is it's got less to do with outsourcing, insourcing, any of that. People are people, and if you start slapping their hands very first time they fail on something, and they're very unlikely to go try that the second and third time around, right? And it happens in Silicon Valley, it happens in Boston, it happens in Bangalore or Beijing. Okay, so there is nothing really earth-shaking about it, but except the point that treat them the same way that you treat people over here. Okay, that speaks to the other contributing factors. Okay, so what am I really talking about? Let's go to the next slide here. I will summarize my key messages to you. So outcome-based is really one option to incentivize innovation, pay for performance, motivate the service providers and their staff. But it's not the only option. It is one that has been tried several times in the recent past, and it does work. Now it's got significant challenges. I talked about them, and there are other things that you need to do to motivate and get them to innovate. And does it make sense for you? It really depends upon your particular situation. I have given the pros and cons here as I have gone along. So let's go to a polling question here. I just want to get some reaction from you. there is, yeah, some of you have probably said this already, but let's just take a quick take. You're already doing it. I think some of them said does not apply, is not interested in trying, sought interested but not sure, definitely interested in trying. So just take a minute or two just to quickly click on what applies to you. So I just want to get some feel for, after having gone through this presentation, how does it come across to you? Does it interest you or not? So oh, this is interesting. Half of you are already doing it, and the other half definitely interested in trying. Great, great, great. That's a good feedback. I appreciate that. All right, let's go to the next slide. After having done, attending webinars, which I also do, and not only deliver webinars, and what do you do with it? Okay. The first step is, does outcome-based make sense for you? How do you go figure that out? Here are some key four areas to identify. First, you got to figure out who the stakeholders are and their priorities, and you need to develop the metrics and change the metrics, contracts, etc. And then go back and reconcile with stakeholders not just in your company but with your service provider. And again, this is almost common sense. You need to weigh the benefits and the risks. Okay, so that's really all about. This is really at a 50,000 foot level. There are more details underneath each of these things, but in the interest of the time available today, these are big blocks of things what you really need to do. And I had a slide about other factors that influence innovation, and you may want to take a look at which ones apply, and you may find that, okay, a few of those apply to you because you're already doing some of the others, or there may be some others that don't have it on the slide, but that may be unique to you. So at the end of the day, you need to quickly develop a roadmap. Your roadmap can be developed for, does outcome-based make sense? What does it take to put it together? Do you need to go do it? Benefits. It's a business case and a roadmap identifying your own situation. By the way, I would submit to you, not every situation lends itself to outcome-based. If you can't define the outcome, if you can't scope things out, then the traditional model may be more applicable to you. So you need to look at all that and put a roadmap together. Roadmap is sounds like a big, long project. Does not have to be. In majority of the cases, this kind of effort can be done in a couple of weeks, couple of calendar weeks. I've done that for several clients. That took no more than a couple of weeks to put the roadmap together. And then you go through implementation. Implementation really involves, you may need to go through setting contract negotiations with your service provider, and those all take time. You got to bring legal people, other things, and so on. You got to implement the changes in processes, roles, responsibilities, and all of that stuff that you have identified in the roadmap. In order to implement, it may take several months, several calendar months, in order to go make it happen. And then again, part of the roadmap needs to be, how do you go plan to implement? Do you go whole hog, do the whole thing, or you do some trials first, try it on a smaller scale and then scale up? So these are all the kinds of things that you need to come up with before you really embark on outcome-based and implementing an innovation culture But at the end of the day, these are all mechanics. But what is in it for you? What is in it for the service provider? You need to answer those key questions and then go to the next level. Again, it's not necessarily straightforward. It's not brain surgery, but you need to know which things that you need to address and develop a roadmap and go to implementation. At this point in time, David, if there are any questions, we can go to that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Seth. At this time, we'd like to open up to questions. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and submit your question to the questions box. Seth, we have a question here. Is outcome-based for everyone, and is there a time when we should not use outcome-based?
Yeah, David, it's a really good question. It is not for everyone, as I was saying a little earlier. There are lots of situations wherein outcome-based may not be the best thing to do. For example, let's just say you are very new to this particular relationship with the service provider. You are still establishing trust. You are still establishing processes. And you may not be able to define the outcomes clearly enough so that the vendor can perform against that. So maybe one option for you is to keep outcome-based as the goal. In fact, you may want to share that goal with your service provider and say, hey, this is where we are going, but let's get started putting in the initial processes and all of that. And in fact, we'll put those with the goal that we are going to go towards outcome-based, but let's get everything down path. So that gives the service provider a comfort level that they're not taking huge risks. Remember, they may be taking a bit of a risk. Again, you have to set it up so that the risk rewards for both of you is worth it, if you will. So the answer to your question, not for everyone. I kind of elaborated on one case wherein it may not make sense. There may be others where it does not make sense, but that is part of the initial due diligence, feasibility analysis of outcome-based, and then developing a roadmap. By the time you are into developing a roadmap, you would know whether it makes sense or not, and what are the benefits, what are the risks, do you want to go forward or not go forward.
Okay, great. Thanks, Seth. And we have a question here. How long does it take to implement outcome-based?
The initial roadmap typically can be done in a couple of weeks. Again, you are not going through all the negotiation, etc. You are hitting at a high level, putting a business case together, and the implementation itself, David, depends a lot. I hate to give a consultant answer, it depends, but it really does. It depends on the size of the project, how many people you have, how big your organization is, and how big is the overall effort, right? If it is a 50% team in your service provider, it's one scale, if you will. But if you have a 500% team, it's altogether a whole different ballgame. So the same principles apply, but the scope of the second one to implement it, how you go about it, and how long it takes, etc., will have to, it varies. It can take anywhere from 3 months at a very minimum. It might take 9 months to a year, if you will, to transition a 500 to 1,000, even some organization, 1,000 people offshore. So those kinds of things take time, trying to transition from one model to another model and making sure the buy-ins happen, understanding happen, training happens at all levels. So it's a size issue, but the fundamentals are the same. The bottom line answer to you is anywhere from a couple to 3 months to 6 to 9 months at the other end in terms of implementation. With the upfront figuring out maybe a couple of weeks. If it's a really large organization, it might take 3 or 4 weeks as opposed to a couple of weeks.
Okay, great. Another question we have here says, how do we measure innovation?
Oh gosh, that is a hard one, David. I really don't know how the heck you measure innovation. Uh, it's it's like, okay, I know when people are innovating, right? So, but that said, how do we measure innovation anywhere? It doesn't have to be in the outsourcing context. When people talk about, gosh, such a company is very innovative. They are coming up with new products and new ideas. Was the iPhone a very innovative product when it got introduced? Yes. But those are I don't expect in the outsourcing context suddenly we find such kind of breakthroughs. But to give having said all this, which is fluffy, to give some specifics, are they taking initiative? Are they in this particular service provider, or do you have to continue to be in the model of telling your service provider everything that they need to do? Are they moving? Are they making such? Again, are they taking initiative to improve the processes? Are they taking initiative to improve productivity? Are they putting in new tools? Those are all straightforward to get visibility on, right? If you are doing exactly the same thing as we did a year ago at the end of another 12 months, there has been no innovation, right? So I think those are some pointers that I can point to. But again, the kind of thing that you do in any given company, it would vary from company to company. How you innovate in a tech support compared to a product development, compared to, let's say, accounting, business process outsourcing. The last one may be really hard to innovate. It's got certain processes, but somebody may come up with ways to do those processes faster using some latest tools that are available. So that's innovation. So those are some tips that I can provide.
Okay, great. And last question we have here that came in was, what level of resistance from vendors do you see and why?
That's a good question, David. I have seen maybe 2 or 3 companies which actually pride themselves that their whole outsourcing model is based on outcome. They are willing to set things up from the get-go as outcome-based. I mean, in fact, they really really promote the idea that that is a differentiator. They are willing to set up outcome-based from the get-go. That said, in a company like India, there are thousands of companies, but I haven't seen majority of them embracing outcome-based approach or the innovation approach. For them, it's a very risk-averse culture, and it is easier to say from their perspective, I provide you the right people, and I will take care of all the logistics, hiring, and my local management, etc. And I'm getting paid X. So there's much more predictive for them. And for majority of the companies, you're taking them to areas that they haven't tried, or at least tried them on a larger scale, so to speak. So for them, the resistance level is there, right? You're taking people out of their comfort zones. So to answer the specific question that you're asking, I would suspect that majority of the companies you talk to, their initial reaction would be they wouldn't say I won't do it, but certainly there would be apprehension on their part to say, hey, the bottom line is expect apprehension. So expect that you have to work with them at a detailed level and make them feel comfortable. Expect that you got to come up with metrics that some of them or many of them should be under their control as well as yours. So you need to go into it with your eyes open. It will take some work, but assuming it works in your situation, your particular company, your products, your particular setup, it's well worth it. That would be my recommendation. Is if you have not tried it, at least try it in your whole organization, or at least try it as an experiment in some part of it. But definitely try it, because outsourcing now has been around for a really long time. It is time to move up the value chain and do more innovative things rather than stick to the good old time-based models, if you will.
Okay, great. We actually had one more question just come in. If you could, really quick, while we have a couple more minutes here, is it possible to have a mix between traditional and the outcome-based?
The question is, can you have a hybrid model, right?
Yes. Yes, a mix between the two.
Yeah. Absolutely. Again, it depends upon, the answer is yes. It depends upon the organization. For any, you could say, I'm going to just draw upon some example. Supposing you are doing 100 to 200% outsourcing. I'm just picking this number arbitrarily. You could have, for all I care, 20 to 30 people at the other end, if you will. Some projects which are easy to come up with outcome-based metrics, yes, you set them up as outcome-based, and some other part of your outsourcing could still be the traditional. The other key point I want to make here is, you may, in fact, that could be part of the roadmap that you develop up front. Could be, hey, you know what, I got, let's say, again, it's easy to look at the number of 100 people or 500 people. That's the numbers that I have. Or, so I'm going to start small in the outcome-based to try it. So your 80-90% of your outsourcing is still traditional, but maybe a small percentage of it is outcome-based. So over time, you can move from the traditional to outcome-based, or you may really forever be a hybrid model. Answer is yes, absolutely can be done that way. And in fact, that's not a bad idea to experiment with outcome-based in a hybrid model and move up the value chain as the conditions permit in your particular organization.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions coming in, so I guess at this time we'll start to wrap up. I just want to thank everybody for joining, all those who joined us, and I want to thank Seth for his presentation, and thanks to Offshoring Success. So thank you very much, Seth.
Thanks. You're welcome.
All right. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.